Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is the Casual Friday podcast. In this week's podcast, I have a finished sweater. I have two new works in progress. I received a wonderful card from a viewer, and I'll tell you about my experience in the sheep barn on Lambwatch. So let's get started. So I have a finished sweater just in time for spring. This is a very warm sweater, so I don't know how much I'll get to wear it, but I'm going to wear it when I can while the weather is still on the cool side. The pattern is called LENU by Strict. I will leave a link to the pattern down in the show notes. I would say I wanted to knit this specific sweater because first of all I wanted a pullover and I wanted a little something on it. I really can't stand knitting just complete stockinette sweater. It's incredibly boring for me. Normally I like texture patterns, sometimes really complex stitch patterns, but plain stockinette, it doesn't do it for me. And I thought, oh, well, this has a nice mock cable down the front, and it has a panel of just plain seed stitch down the back. And I thought, well, that should be enough to hold my interest. And it was fine while I was doing all of the bodice shaping, because this is a top-down seamless construction. It uses the contiguous method. I explained what that method is a few Casual Fridays before. I will leave links down below to showing you how this project was begun and comparing it to a different project that I started at the same time that was set-in sleeves too. The other sweater was simultaneous set-in sleeves. This is contiguous set-in sleeves. Difference in how these start out. But I was really interested in actually knitting a garment using this method rather than just kind of swatching it out to understand the construction, which is what I had done maybe 15 years ago, something like that. So that was interesting to me. So while I was doing all of that shaping, and the stitch patterns were right in the front where there was no shaping going on, that was interesting. Once I got below the armholes, and I was working in the round, it wasn't enough. It was a pretty, for me, kind of a boring slog to do the body. And that is not a diss on the designer. It's a lovely design. That's just a reflection of what I prefer in my knitting projects. The sleeves, even though they were completely stockinette, somehow weren't as boring because the rounds were smaller. And I was doing, I had to keep track of when I was doing my decreases and things like that. So somehow that wasn't quite as boring, although, you know, always having to do the second sleeve when you just did one was a little boring. One thing I did try, before I did the ribbing, I did try it on. I only had one sleeve and I couldn't really get a good sense of whether it was really time to start the ribbing or not without the other sleeve, and the neck ribbing hadn't been done yet. So I did this second sleeve so that I could try it on and really make sure both of them were hitting at the same place. And then I ended up knitting them each an extra 3/4 of an inch before I did the ribbing. I think I still did the sleeves slightly shorter than what the pattern said, because when you look at the pattern photo, the sleeves are going, you know, halfway down the hand. That isn't where I want my sleeves to hit. The amount of positive ease that the pattern calls for or is designed for is, I think, 4 3/4 inches to 7 inches. And that is more ease than I want. It's meant to be oversized, but I am no longer interested in oversized sweaters. I did that when I learned to knit back in the mid-80s, and through the 90s I did oversized sweaters, and that's no longer what I want to knit for my body shape and personal style, if I even have a style. I chose a size that gave me just under or just about 4 inches because the sizes jump, you know, a number of inches at a time. So I just didn't want that much ease in the body. The arms are meant to be pretty close fitting, and they are. They're plenty comfortable for me. There's still, you know, room in there, but when I originally tried this on with a long sleeve t-shirt, which is usually what I wear under my sweaters, there's just too much drag on the fabric and it felt tight. And I think it felt tight because the t-shirt was a very thin t-shirt, but it just felt tight because there was drag. It couldn't just move against my skin. The good news is that this wool is very comfortable against the skin. So I did use, it calls for 2 yarns held together. It calls for Brooklyn Tweed Loft, which is a woolen spun yarn, and it is their fingering weight. There's Loft, which is the fingering, Shelter, which is the worsted, and then Quarry, which is the bulky weight. And you're meant to hold it together with a strand of lace weight silk mohair. I did not hold it with the silk mohair. I held it with a different yarn. I have to look at my notes to see what it's called. It's by a company called Yarn Citizen, and the yarn is Trinity Cashmere. So it is a yarn that's similar to a silk mohair. It has like that silk core. It does have silk, and then the fiber, the halo fiber around it is super baby alpaca and cashmere. So it does have a halo in the yarn. When it's knit into the fabric, there's just the barest hint of a halo. It doesn't have the same halo as the mohair, but it at least gives it that additional structure in the stitches along with that woolen spun yarn. So it's a fingering and a lace weight held together, and normally 2 strands of a regular fingering weight would equal a DK to worsted weight yarn. But these together, because a woolen spun yarn has a wider range of gauges that can be worked at because it's kind of self-supporting. It doesn't have a lot of a drape to it. And then you add that silk mohair, or in this case, the baby alpaca silk cashmere blend. It holds itself up. And this was worked at a gauge of 19 stitches over 4 inches or 10 centimeters. And, you know, they're sticky wools, and so they're not just sliding along like a superwash wool would. It, you know, it's a stickier yarn, and it doesn't have the kind of drape that you'd see in a worsted spun yarn. I tried it on when it was done but not blocked, and I felt it was a little short in the body. The way that the stitch pattern, this is a mock cable, it's a 32-row repeat. So you either need to end it at row 16 or row 32 in order to have that vertical symmetry at the top and the bottom. And so you're kind of stuck with where you end it, because otherwise you do another 16 rows, which would be another like 2.5 inches of length. So it's a little bit shorter than I wanted, but when I blocked it, I just kind of stretched it and blocked it, gave it some extra length. So I'm happy with the length now. I think it's a perfectly fine sweater. I really like the fit in the upper body. Now that I understand the construction method and how it works, if I were going to use this construction method again, I know how I could work the body so it didn't have that much ease. I would also add a waist shaping. I prefer that because I just, you know, when I look at something like this, and because there's no drape to it, it just kind of hangs out there. If there was more drape in this fabric, it would probably drape more around my body. I just prefer that over a boxy fit. I know boxy knits are trendy. I just don't want them. So I know how I would change this. I would also, because the arm is pretty close fitting, because the body gets much bigger, that helps to create a larger circumference at the underarm. I would probably need to make the armhole a little bit deeper if I was going to make the body narrower in order to have enough room. But I really do like the way that this fits in the upper body. I'm really happy with that. You don't have to worry this has set-in sleeves, but because it has this really wide saddle, you don't see that seam line up here, so that if it's over a little bit one way or the other, it can look a little wrong. In this case, you don't see those seam lines here, but you can see kind of where it comes right here, because once this saddle comes out to this point, and then you stop making the saddle and you start dropping right here. If I wanted a similar fit in the upper body but wanted it narrower here, I would probably make the armhole a little bit deeper. So overall, I think it's fine. Like I said, I like the way it fits up here, not crazy about the way it fits around the body. It's very comfortable to wear. I don't know if you guys have heard, but Brooklyn Tweed is no longer going to be manufacturing yarn, which is a real shame. It was a completely U.S. manufactured or produced wool yarn. It's wool from sheep herds in like Montana, Wyoming, scoured in the U.S., dyed in the U.S., milled in the U.S., and that's too bad that that's no longer going to be available. They're going to still produce patterns, but they're not going to do yarn anymore, which, like I said, is a shame. So I think that's it. So I'm really happy with it. Again, I'll leave a link to the pattern page down below. And just be aware that the way that this is intended to be worn is with quite a bit of positive ease around the body, but with pretty close fitting sleeves. So you kind of need to think about if that's the style you're going for or not. But otherwise, it's a very nice knit. I wish there had been more stitch patterning in it just to keep me interested in the lower body. But otherwise, 2 thumbs up. So I always like to share when somebody sends something to my P.O. box. And this past week or so, I got a card in the mail at my P.O. box from a woman named Virginia. And she said that I could share what she wrote in here, and I would love to, because she had a lot of nice things to say. Dear Roxanne, enclosed is a check for $65. I so enjoy your YouTube channel and finally found that your address was listed in your channel description page. I get so much value from your YouTube demonstrations and other topics, and I was sorry that I couldn't just do a little online jig to send you something for your consistent efforts in support of the knitting community. You're in the top tier of knitting teachers on YouTube, which is very nice. Then she says, today is the day. I'm going to do it, I thought to myself. I happily spent $60 to buy Cecilia Campochiaro's sequence knitting in the past decade, and you have more than a book's worth of knitting treasure that is so very helpful. I think there may be many knitters in my age group, an older adult, I'm 81 this year, who do not do payments online. Please feel free to use any of my comments as you may see fit. I'm sure there are others who would be happy to coffee you via snail mail. Sincerely, Virginia. And so that is really nice. So what she's talking about with the coffee is I have this thing called Ko-fi, and there's links always in the video description, and it's where you can buy me a coffee. And so it's like you can do like a one-time donation, or you can do like a monthly subscription to that. And all of the money goes directly to my PayPal account. I just have to pay PayPal fees. Ko-fi doesn't take any cut of that. They're just the conduit. And so you can buy multiple coffees, or you can just write in the amount you want. You can, like I said, you could do a one-time donation. You can do a monthly subscription. But that's what she's talking about. And occasionally I do get people who send me a check at my P.O. box because they don't want to use PayPal or do any sort of online payments. So my demographic is fairly wide for my channel, but it does skew to older people. So so that's what she's talking about. There's Ko-fi, and then there's what's called super thanks on YouTube. Like right below the video screen, there's like a little heart with a $sign. If you live in a different country where don't use dollars, it might be the symbol for your currency. I don't know. And that's another way that you can support me. I don't have that many patterns. You can buy patterns, any of those ways if you want to support me and my channel, other than allowing YouTube ads to play at the beginning and the end. I never run mid-roll ads in my videos because I think that's disruptive. So any way that people want to support me is fine, but I did think that was a lovely card that Virginia sent me, and I really appreciate it. So thank you, Virginia. Minnesota Knitters Guild is having its Great Guild Getaway Retreat this weekend. So I'm recording this a couple of days early. And I knew that I was going to be finishing this sweater up, and I had to think about what else do I want to get on my needles and take with me to the retreat. So one of the things I'm going to be taking is some swatches that I'm working on for next week's Technique Tuesday. It's probably going to be a two-parter. Two related things, but done slightly differently. Anyway, I'm going to be working on that. But I always like to have a plain vanilla sock on the needles, and I haven't had one on the needles, I guess, since February. And I wanted to get one started. Well, I found out, I was at a knitting group. We have this monthly Brew and Knit With You event that is at different places around the Twin Cities once a month. When I was getting ready to leave a couple of weekends ago, somebody said, "Hey, does anybody want a ticket to Crafting at the Movies?" And I said, "Oh, I've been wondering about those. I've been thinking about them and trying to figure out when they are." And she's like, "Well, I have one and I can't go, and it's tomorrow night." And so I said, "I love it." So she gave me her ticket. And what it is, well, we have a local yarn shop called Harriet and Alice. It's probably the yarn shop that's closest to me, just a block away from, it's at an area called 50th and France. And so it's like a little shopping area. It's like the downtown area of the suburb that's right next to Minneapolis. And it kind of spans the border between Minneapolis and Edina. So there's also a theater that's been there for, I don't know, 95 years. And during COVID, or sort of at the tail end of COVID, it got remodeled. So it has stadium seating, and it's really nice. And Harriet and Alice rents out like it's a 4-theater Cineplex thing. And Harriet and Alice will rent out one of them, and they sell tickets for this Crafting at the Movies night. So you're in this nice recliner, and there's a cup holder and then this little tray that you can rotate toward you, so you can put your knitting project or snacks or whatever on there. And then you're leaned back in this recliner. And then they don't turn the lights all the way down. They just keep them up the way they would be if the trailers were running or things like that. And so you can see what you're doing. And the movie they were showing was Royal Tenenbaums, which came out like 20 years ago. And I know I saw it in the theaters back then. I could remember nothing about it. It was almost like seeing it completely new. I mean, there's vaguely, the characters were sort of familiar. But I was sitting there with this brand new ball of sock yarn. I pulled the center out, and I got this huge thing of yarn barf. And so I was spending about half an hour untangling the yarn so I could get started. I cast on for a sock, and I did the ribbing, and I got, a little bit, maybe half an inch of stockinette done by the time the movie was over. And of course, I'm leaned back this whole time, in the recliner. I got home, came up to my office, and I was looking at the sock, and I thought, geez, the fabric seems really loose. And I looked at the ball band, because this is a brand I don't normally use. It's called Online Sock, but it's the same kind of yardage and gauge listed on the ball band as what I normally use. I'm like, this is just way too loose. So I ripped it all out and I cast on again. And what I learned was that when I'm leaned back in a recliner, this position makes me knit looser. So that's something I'll have to know for next time, is not be leaned so far back, is to try to be more upright, because I just had to take out everything that I had started. But I'll be able to take this to the retreat and work on that. So that's one project. Then my Technique Tuesday swatches. And then I'm also working on this little project. It's actually a kerchief, so it's not going to be a whole lot bigger than this. A little bit. It has an interesting construction. You start at this edge, I think. And so you're knitting in, or maybe it's this edge, I don't remember. I think, but anyway, you start it with a few stitches, and then on right side rows, you're increasing at this edge, but not at that edge. So you end up with this right triangle. Then you bind off all of the stitches along where the live stitches are, and then immediately turn it and then pick up along those stitches so that the bind off chain is facing the right side. And then you pick up stitches along the selvage of the other side of the triangle. And so now you can work your way down, and it switches to there's a little bit of a garter stitch, and then it switches to brioche, and then it's going to end with a little bit of garter stitch. So the reason I'm knitting this, because this is not an accessory I would normally wear or use, is because at this Brew and Knit With You, the woman who organizes it, Emily, kind of went around to everyone's table and said, hey, what about if at Shepherd's Harvest, we're planning a meetup at Shepherd's Harvest, which is our local fiber festival that occurs every year on Mother's Day weekend, that would be our monthly knitting group would be at Shepherd's Harvest. And she said, oh, it'd be really fun to do a make-along beforehand, and so of a kerchief. So that's a little project, and it's something that you could wear to Shepherd's Harvest regardless of what the weather is, because May is really unpredictable. Like May 15th in Minnesota is last frost date, meaning that if you want to plant a garden, you have to wait until May 15th because you could still be getting a frost. It could be really lovely outside, sunny and warm like it was last year, where it's too hot to wear a sweater. Or it could be like a lot of years where it's cold and rainy, and not only do you have a sweater on, you have a jacket or a raincoat or something. So it's like a little accessory that you could wear at Shepherd's Harvest, and I guess spot other people who had done the make-along. This is something that I don't really get. Like, I'm not somebody who picks their projects based on what other people are doing, like what's trendy or popular. In fact, the more popular something is, the less likely I am to want to do it. I just look at what I want to do and I do that. So I'm always interested in what other people are knitting, but I kind of don't care in the way, meaning that whatever somebody else wants to do is fine, and I am not worried about is this what everyone else is doing, or can we all do this together? Like, that isn't something that I would normally do. Like, if there was a knit along that was something that I really liked, maybe, but like, I'm not the kind of knitter who's like, oh, with my knitting friend, let's knit the same sweater. Like, people do that, and if that's something you both want to do and that brings you joy and you really like that, that's terrific, but it isn't something I typically would do. I'm a little puzzled by the point of this, like what is this about? Because we're all knitting our whatever kerchief pattern we want. So I don't really understand what it's supposed to do. If it's supposed to signal to other people, oh, you did the knit along too. Like, I don't know. So I try, when I'm puzzled by things in the knitting community, like does everybody want to knit this kind of thing? Not necessarily a specific pattern, but a certain category, and I don't get it, I will try it and then see if I can figure out what the fuss is about. So I used to be, the only thing I ever knit was sweaters. And then when I came back to knitting in 2005, and I started actually meeting other knitters in person and online, because I'd been a completely isolated knitter for 19 years. Didn't occasionally met other knitters, but never knit with another person. I really started broadening my knitting horizons. I was also when I started the Master Hand Knitting program, because I'm like, oh, there's a way I can actually sort of systematically learn more about knitting, and there's a way to approach that. And so I started knitting all kinds of projects, you know, hats and mittens and all kinds of things, and socks was one of them. And that one really mystified me, because people who would I would see people asking why, like, what's the point of knitting socks? Why do you do that? Oh, well, they fit so much better, or they're so much more comfortable. And I was just puzzled by that, because commercial socks fit me just fine. I have a very average sized foot, so they're never too big or too small. Like, I just didn't get it. So, and by then, self-striping sock yarn had come out. When I had attempted socks maybe 5 years before, or maybe even 8 years before, I had little kids, like a baby and a toddler, and I only could knit at night. For about an hour, half hour to an hour before, you know, in bed watching TV. So I was really tired, and it didn't have much knitting time, and it was tiny needles, and it was just variegated yarn in stockinette, and it wasn't self-striping yarn. And it was like, this is just taking too long, and it's not interesting. That the yarn was too plain. And so I abandoned it. And so in 2005, I'm going to try again, and oh my gosh, self-striping yarn, that is so cool. You could just like, what's the next stripe? What's the next stripe going to be? And that was a lot more fun. And I was also working on other ways of changing my knitting style to make knitting in the round easier, because my knitting style was very good for knitting flat, but not so much for knitting in the round. So I finished that first sock, not even the first pair, the first sock. I tried it on, and I went, oh, I really do like the way that this feels. It wasn't that it fit better, it just felt better, and I couldn't really articulate why. I just knew that I liked it. And the self-striping sock yarn, ever since then, has been one of my favorite things for sock knitting, and I still love it today. But until I actually tried it, I didn't get it. So that's happened with other categories of things, like dishcloths. Like, why would you knit a dishcloth? And I knit some dishcloths and went, this is actually fun. It's a nice way, if I just want to knit something on a Sunday afternoon and then I want to be done with it, that's great. And they actually, I don't use them to wash dishes, but I do use them to wipe counters and sometimes scrub the floor if something gets really stuck on there. So I do like them. And I do knit them occasionally, and so that changed my mind. But a lot of times, if it's a specific project, a specific sweater, or specific this or that, I'm like, that is not for me. I don't like that. This sweater right here, I was really interested in the construction method, and I wanted to try that and really understand it, to know what the advantages and the disadvantages of this construction method over another one would be. So I have a better sense of that now, but it's a category of sweater, contiguous. It wasn't a specific one that everybody was knitting. Like, so anyway, this little make along, it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle to me. Like, I don't get why we're doing this. If any of you are the kind who really like to do make-alongs and are enthusiastic, like, if you could just explain to me, like, what you get out of it, like, why do you like that? I would love to know down in the comments, because it's just like, maybe I'll figure it out at Shepherd's Harvest. I'll be like, oh, I get it now. I don't know. It's a puzzle. So that's something I will be taking to the retreat as well. It won't take me long to finish it. It's going pretty fast. I've been mentioning probably every Casual Friday for the past few months that I volunteer as a fiber volunteer at Gale Woods Farm. This is a working farm that is owned by our regional park system. It was donated to the park by the Gale family 25 years ago on the condition that it remain a working farm for educational purposes. So a lot of school field trips go there. They've got summer camp things on Now that it's spring, they have Saturday at the farm, these public days where you can actually go in the barn. It's a huge piece of land. It's like more than 500 acres. And there are woods, and there is water, and there is farmland, and there's pastures for the cows and the sheep and to graze. They have chickens there. They tap trees for maple syrup. They have honey that they must have honeybees somewhere. I don't know where the honeybees are. But they grow all kinds of things. They want people to understand where their food comes from. So yes, many of the animals will get butchered in the fall, and the meat will be sold in the farm store. They have a farm store, and they sell produce throughout the summer. But they have this flock of fin sheep. They do all of this. A lot of the educational things have to do with fiber. So they have a lot of fiber volunteers who help make the kits that either get sold in the store or for programs, for summer camps, for school groups, classes that people take, all kinds of things. But they also have all of the processing that needs to get done. So they had the spring, they do a spring and a fall shearing, and the spring shearing was, I don't know, a month or so ago. And so we've been scouring those fleeces, those of us who like to do the fiber processing. So there's the scouring. Once the scouring gets done, then we'll start doing dyeing. Lately, I've also been carding some of the white fleeces, and they have an electric carder, and I can use a little tool called a diz. It's just a piece of wood with a hole in it. And as it comes off the drum carder, I'm making roving, and then the roving can be turned into braids that get sold in the farm store, or it can be used in some of the programming or for making things by the fiber volunteers who might do wet felting or create the kits, those kinds of things. But one of the things that happens in the spring is that the new lambs are born, and fin sheep are very prolific. They will normally have at least twins. Triplets are very common. Then there can be some quads and even quints. So they had 14 ewes, and they ended up with more than 40 lambs. I don't know the exact number. There was one ewe left, and I thought there had been 38 lambs, and now they're saying there's 44. And I said, did she have 6? No, she had 3. So it's 41 or 44, I don't know. And there were some lambs that, there was one ewe who aborted in February, so she didn't have any live lambs. They were aborted a couple of months early. And there was one sheep, she was the first time mom. She had one live baby and then 3 very undeveloped lambs. And then there were a few others that were stillborn, like a lamb or ewe that had quads. One was, and it was born really early, like nobody expected, and it was in the middle of the night, and so she didn't get the mucus off that one baby's face, and so it died. And then there was a ewe that had quints, and one of them was stillborn. So there is at least one, I think there's one ewe that did have 5 live lambs. And that's a lot of lambs to feed when you are one ewe and your udder has 2 teats. That's all they have. I was surprised to learn that. I'm like, don't cows have like 4? Why do cows have 4 when they have one baby? but ewes only have 2 when they might have multiples, especially fin sheep. They asked the volunteers to sign up for what's called Lambwatch. And so it's a 2-week period where they're expecting that's when the lambs are going to be born. And quite a few of them were born early before Lambwatch started. I did Lambwatch on Friday, April 11th with Shelly, she's in my spinning group, and she's the one who first told me about Gale Woods and encouraged me to be a fiber volunteer. So it's because of her that I'm there, and I'm very happy. So we were doing it together. It started at 8 at night and it goes to 1 in the morning. We got there and a ewe had just given birth. Like while I was getting ready to leave my house and I was driving there, she gave birth to 4 lambs. They were still wet when we got there. There was a public event going on at the farm, so there were quite a few staff people around who had been there to help her out. And they were telling us, you know, things to watch out for and to keep an eye on. And then there's the ewe that had 5 lambs. 2 of them needed to be bottle fed at 8 o'clock and then again at midnight, because that's just too much for they were still hanging around mama. She still, you know, takes care of them otherwise, but they have to get bottle fed. So we got to do that, and that was it was really fun. First of all, you have to catch them, and what happens is when they are born, they're put in these what are called nursery pens, and so I think there are 4 nursery pens. It's a small pen. It's got all this clean straw bedding. There's buckets of water hanging off the side. Once mom has given birth, she's given a pound of grain for every baby that she had, and so she can have a nice meal. There's a little section near the wall that has bars on it that the babies can get through, but the mom can't. And that's where the warming lamps are. And the reason for that is that because after they give birth, they're tired and, you know, they want to lie down and rest. And sometimes they might inadvertently lie down on top of one of their babies and smother them. So they have this little area that's nice and warm where so they're going to want to be there, and but they can get to mom when they need to, but the mom can't end up lying there and lying on top of them. And you know, it's interesting because being there was lots of activity after the nursery pens. They stay in their nursery pens for a few days. And then they move to the larger enclosure, and there's a enclosure within that enclosure where it's called the pit. So it's like a secondary spot where they go, and then I don't know how long they're in there, and then they can go to the main enclosure where everybody's running around together. So it goes in cycles. It'll be really quiet. Everybody's lying down and dozing. Moms and the babies are all lying down, and then pretty soon, at some point, like an hour or so, some babies will start running around and making noise, and then the moms are standing up, and it's very noisy, and the babies are eating, and they're running around. They're doing what is called pronking, where they're up and bouncing up, and they're jumping on hay bales and jumping off and chasing each other, and then it will quiet down again for a while, and then it will go up again. So it was probably when we were bottle feeding at midnight. I'm holding this lamb on my lap, bottle feeding it, and finished. I was just kind of holding it, and I heard one of the brand new lambs just screaming its head off, and it was the only only sheep of any size that was making any noise. So I put my lamb down. I went over and went in the cage, and one of the lambs was lying down in the main part of the enclosure, not in the little protected part. And mom had laid down, and she was lying on its legs, and it was just screaming because it couldn't get out. So I kind of prodded her a little bit, and she stood up, and then the baby's like, oh, it stood up, and we made sure that it could walk around, and then it went into the little part where it was at the warming jugs were there. So that was really fun. I took a picture of Shelly after she fed her lamb, and it had fallen asleep in her lap. It was so sweet. The lambs have ear tags. So after they leave their nursery pens and they go into the pit, that's when they get their ear tags. So it's an alphanumeric tag. So the first letter represents what year it is. And so this year it's N. And then there's 3 digits after that. So they just go in order of when the babies are born, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And so we had to find these 2 little white lambs that were N14 and N15. And Finn sheep can come in colors, and there were black and brown and spotted sheep, but there were way more white sheep. And we're trying to find them. And we captured him, and I thought, geez, mine's got like this little colored smudge on its head. And Shelly finally found hers, and hers had a darker smudge. And somebody who happened to still be there said, oh yeah, the bottle babies get marked on their heads to make them easier to find. So we're like, oh, well, it would have been nice if we'd known that before we were trying to watch them running past and trying to read the tags. But they were so sweet. My favorite lamb is one of the ones that was born in the ewe that went super early before anybody expected. She had 3 lambs that survived. 2 were white and just, you know, big size. And she was black and white, little peanut. She barely weighed 3 pounds when she was born. And she just such a cute peanut. She was so little that first day after, because I saw her when she was like a day old. And then when we were there for Lambwatch, she's just running around, bouncing around. And at one point I scooped her up and I was holding her, and Shelley took some pictures of me, and you can see how miserable I was to be holding that little cute peanut. So it's just been so fun to be involved in all of these different aspects of the farm and seeing the sheep at different stages and being involved in processing, like being there on shearing day, and you can still feel the warmth of the sheep in the fleece when you're skirting it, getting all the icky bits out of it. And then being there for scouring, I was there on Monday scouring fleeces, and I noticed that one of the fleeces I scoured was a really big one, and I saw that it was from a ewe that was K27, and that's the sheep that had just given birth right before we got there for Lambwatch. So I got to scour her fleece the other day. So once we get done scouring, we're going to start dyeing. So I'll let you guys know how that goes, because I've done a little dyeing at home and I know a little bit about it. But one of the things I love about this is having the repetition and practice and building muscle memory of doing these different activities and processing wool fleeces, that when it's time for me to do it at home with my own stuff, I'll just be able to do it. I just wouldn't be able to get that much practice and repetition and build the muscle memory just doing it at home myself. So this has just been such a rewarding volunteer experience. I'm so happy to be there. So that was Lambwatch 2025. It's very exhausting to stay up that far past my bedtime and then drive home, be there till 1, and then it takes like 35-40 minutes to drive home. I was useless the next day, very tired. I expect it's not going to get any easier than that in the years to come, but it was such a fun experience to be able to be there with the sheep for that many hours and really see what the babies are doing, and how just a day or two, what a difference that can make in how the lambs behave. So I would say if you have an opportunity to do some kind of volunteer work in any sort of one of these kind of farm things, whether it's like we have a historical society, our historical society owns a farm and they do historical things and they have these kind of animals and stuff too. Like, you might want to get involved in that, or if your area has some kind of a farm type of thing like this that has volunteers, or just anything. I mean, you could even just ask a shepherd if they need help sometime with shearing and with skirting fleeces if they need help. It's just such an interesting experience, and you can learn so much. Well, that's it for this week's Casual Friday. If you have any comments or questions about today's video, or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below, or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.